Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Hillsborough Township Planning Board meeting, excuse me, of September 14th, 2023. Please join me in a salute to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be advised this meeting has been duly advertised according to Section 5 of the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, otherwise known as the Sunshine Law. Notice of the 2023 annual meeting schedule and amended meeting dates have been provided to the officially designated newspapers, the Township Clerk, posted on the Township's website, and available here at the Hillsborough Township Municipal Complex. In addition, application documents have been made available on the Township Civic Clerk website, and complete applications are available in the Planning and Zoning Department for inspection in accordance with the public meeting notice. And with that, may I have excuse me, a roll call of board members and also board and township professionals, please.
Okay, Vice Chairman Julian is absent. Secretary Peason is absent. Mr. Delcourt absent. And Mr. Redowitz absent. Mr. Wagner.
Here.
Mr. Scobo.
Here.
Ms. Smith. Here. Committeeman Ciccarelli.
Here.
Mayor Lapani.
Here.
Chairman Sirachi.
Here.
Mr. Coyce.
Here.
Mr. Bernstein.
Here.
Mr. Mayhew.
Here.
Mr. Tolfson.
Here.
And I am here.
Welcome, everyone. So first up, well, actually, we're going to be going through, there's not really much on the agenda. There are no consideration of meeting minutes, no consideration of resolutions, no planning board business, and no consideration of ordinances. So we will move to business from the floor for matters not on this evening's agenda. And again, some ground rules. It's not a Q&A session. It's comments only. No comments regarding warehousing, direct or indirect, and the limit is 5 minutes. Please come to the mic, state your name and address for the record, please. See no one, we are moving on to applications tonight. Public hearing, Homestead Road LLC, and I'll invite the applicant and objectors to come forward to your respective tables. Homestead Road LLC with a file number of 21-PB-25-MS/MSPV with a time of decision of the end of this month. This application is continued from last week without further notice. And I think just for the record, Counselor.
Yes. Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Craig Giannetti, the law firm Day Pitney, on behalf of the applicant Homestead Road LLC.
Okay. Get the objectors on.
Since I'm objector one, I'll go. My name is Mike Pissarro. It's P-I-S-A-U-R-O. I'm the policy director for the Watershed Institute.
Scott Gross, objector number 2.
Brian Tarantino, objector on behalf of SWAT.
John Lanahan, objector number 4.
Okay, I don't think objector 5's here tonight.
She's not going to be here tonight.
Okay, all right. Thank you. And before we begin, I just want to remind everyone, just with the mics and all, make sure that they're in front of you, very close, and speak very loud and clear so that the audience can hear. And more importantly, our stenographer needs to hear everyone on the record. So also, please don't step on each other, verbally, so that she can follow the discussion.
Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Giannetti starts again, I would like to place 2 items on the record. We have received a certification of absent board member examination of records / eligibility to vote from board member Scobo regarding last week's meeting. Also from the mayor, Sean Lapani, regarding last week's meeting. They are both eligible to participate tonight.
Okay, excellent. Thank you both. Counselor.
So good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Again, Craig Giannetti, the law firm Day Pitney, on behalf of the applicant Homestead Road LLC. I would like the record to reflect it's currently 7:15 p.m. The meeting did start at 7:10 p.m. As you're aware, this is a continued application for preliminary and final major site plan approval and minor subdivision approval for property located at 189 and 203 Homestead Road, property located in the TECD Transitional Economic Development District. We've had several hearings on this application already, including the most recent one last Thursday, September 7th. We've completed our direct examination or completed the presentation of our civil engineer, our planner with respect to the subdivision, our LSRP on environmental issues, and we completed our direct examination of our architect. We also completed objector cross-examination of the architect, and we had substantial public questioning at the end of the last meeting, and there were a few outstanding. So our architect is here to finish public questioning and then move on from there. So unless there's any housekeeping matters or anything of me, I'd like to call my witness up to the stand.
Please, sir.
I'd like to call Larry Valenza.
Okay. We're going to also swear him back in.
Raise your right hand and sit. Testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
State your full name, spell your last name for the record, and at least for the record, remind us by whom you're employed and your credentials.
Larry Valenza, Valenza, and I'm representing M&H Architects, and I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey.
Mr. Valenza, I assume your license is still valid from last week?
Yes, sir.
Does the board have any questions or issues with Mr. Valenza as his continuing expert?
Nope.
All right, Mr. Giannetti?
So at this point, I'd like to reopen Mr. Valenza to public questions.
Okay, do I need to?
Yes.
Okay. May I have a motion to open to public?
Second.
Okay. Do I got to do a roll call? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, this is continuation of the witnesses' testimony from last week. If there's anyone that would like to question the witness on their testimony, and again, it's questions, not commentary, please do so. State your name and address for the record. And also, if you did ask a question of the witness last week, I ask you to please, you had the one bite at the apple. We need to move along.
And Chairman, at other meetings, I don't know if it was done last week, when the witnesses came up, they were also asked to identify whether they are members of SWAT.
Yes.
And I guess the
Well,
watershed institute for that matter, but
Right, and I will remind and ask everyone too, also, once you state your name and address for the record, please state if you are represented by any of the objectors. And I will also ask the objectors to screen anyone you see up there and raise your hand if you disagree.
All right, Bill Martin, 237 Hillsborough Road. I am not associated with anybody.
Thank you.
All right. I'd like to start with the construction and how it will affect our quality of life for the next 1 to 2 years.
Is it a question of the architect?
Yes. Okay. How many dump trucks filled with gravel will be required for the footings and pads for both warehouses?
I don't know.
Okay. How many cement trucks will be required for the footings and pads of these warehouses?
I don't know those quantities.
Can we find them out?
That's a question for a contractor.
Okay. How many dump trucks full of gravel will be required for the driveway and parking lots?
I'm not going to know any quantities of construction building materials.
So that goes for the asphalt also.
Correct.
All right. You stated the walls could be tilt-up panels.
Yes.
I guess you can't tell us how many cement trucks would be required for those panels, are there?
No.
Okay. Do you know what size crane is going to take to pull those walls into place?
No. It's a standard crane that they use for these size panels, but I don't, these are all contractor questions.
Do we have a contractor I can question?
I don't believe,
No.
they've brought one as a witness, so.
Great. All right, so you can't tell me how the crane would get to the site either. Most of these cranes seem to use low-boy trailers, and I suspect that a low-boy trailer trying to get over the railroad bridge, the railroad bridge would be
Please keep it to a
coming-
question, not,
All right, you stated the walls could be precast. Will the walls be brought in by flatbed trucks?
If they're precast, yes.
What is the weight of the trucks?
I don't know.
Will the trucks be oversized?
No.
Okay. How much noise and pollution will be generated by all these trucks since they don't shut down?
I'm going to object to the question. The
now
witness-
let your witness, if he cannot answer it, just say, I can't answer
Yeah,
it.
I can't answer that
We
question.
just keep moving along.
Okay. Who owns and maintains the railroad bridge?
Just say you don't know.
I don't know.
Okay. All right. All right, this is moving on to operations. At the 9/7/23 Planning Board meeting, there were questions about the number of employees. You said that the number of parking spaces determines the number of employees. I'd like to point out that my wife, myself, and a neighbor arrived in the same vehicle tonight. Another thing, depending on the tenant, they may use shuttle buses to bring employees.
Okay,
Objection.
please,
The witness
question,
testifying.
no interjection, just question. Direct questions, please.
All right, since we didn't have a transcription of this last week's meeting, I transcribed the opening statement from the video. I believe it's accurate. You said everything that happens at this site happens within the building. The only thing that happens outside the building is trucks coming in off the street. They circulate around the building and they pull up to a dock door. Once they engage the building, the back door of the trailer is open, the dock door is opened, and the forklifts go from inside the building to inside the trailer to unload it. That brings the goods into the building. They sort them, stack them, usually on racking. Sometimes it's high piles, floor storage. They sort them sometimes. They repackage sometimes. They send out smaller batches to different places, but all of it is inside.
Is there a
Objection.
question?
Is there
I know,
a
I'm
question?
sorry, I'm going to, please get to a question. We don't need a repeat of the transcription.
He is saying this is all inside the building.
Okay, so please ask a question regarding the operations of inside the
Part of the
building.
operations in this, he said that they don't store materials
Objection.
outside the building. They do not unload trucks outside the building.
Can you please ask a question?
Well, I'm going to make a statement first, because that would be...
No, there's no
Objection.
statement. One last
The
time.
TEC
Ask a question, or please, we will
All right.
take the next member from the public.
The TECD zoning calls for warehousing, shipping, and receiving located completely within an enclosed building. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so what you described as everything happening inside the building would fit what the TEC calls an enclosed building, correct?
Yes.
All right. But you have a whole secondary operation outside. It involves 137 trailer parking spots where mule trucks would be moving trailers around. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Trucks will be held in queue, storing material and waiting to be processed. Is that correct?
Potentially, yes.
Trucks that are processed will be moved to the parking spaces waiting to be picked up. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. You gave a scenario that if a tractor trailer arrives and the dock it's supposed to use is occupied, it will drop its trailer in one of the parking spots pending processing, correct?
Yes.
All right, I don't have a transcript, but I believe you said that a trailer that has been processed will be moved to the trailer parking space.
Maybe.
All right, could an arriving truck that is dropping its trailer then pick up one of the processed trailers?
Yes.
Won't this be what most of the trucks are doing, dropping their trailers and letting the mule trucks take them to the dock at the appropriate time while they pick up a processed trailer?
I can't say if most of them will do that.
Many?
It may happen, it may not happen at all. Without a specific user, I don't know what percentage would happen
Okay.
that way.
But if everything happened inside the enclosed building, like your original statement, you wouldn't need any parking places, would you?
Can you repeat the question?
If everything happened inside the building, and as he said in his opening statement, there wouldn't be any requirement for trailer parking places, would there?
Everything does happen within the building, except for the movement of trucks.
And the storage of material in trucks that are waiting in a queue to be processed?
We're splitting hairs here, but
You're saying that
The-
material that is brought in and put into a trailer parking spot with materials in it, waiting to be processed, is inside the building?
the trailer is loaded from inside the building, and then the trailer is moved outside the building, but that's the
it's-
only way to move a trailer.
And that trailer would be holding materials waiting to be picked up?
Possibly, yes.
Okay, but a new trailer coming in that doesn't go directly to the dock is going to drop its trailer, and that is going to have materials in it, and it's going to be in queue waiting to be processed, correct?
Possibly.
All right, if a tractor trailer that is dropping its trailer off, like that circumstance, is then picking up one of the process trailers, wouldn't that have to be pre-planned and coordinated by a dispatcher?
Yes.
All right, would that make it a depot?
I don't know what the definition of a depot is.
All right, I'll get to the mule trucks now. There's a question about how these trucks are fueled. Do you know that answer yet?
No.
All right. I don't know if I can put this into evidence, but I have a picture.
You'd need-
Objection.
Yeah, you'd have to be sworn in and be open to cross-examination.
It's a picture, a photograph.
Mr. Bernstein?
At the point in time where the public has the right to speak as public members on this application, then at that point, and since Mr. Martin has indicated he has a picture, if he'd like to provide that to the planning department in advance so that everyone would have it in anticipation. But if it's being used relative to examining the witness or cross-examining, et cetera, not at this time.
All right. So I guess I can't describe what the picture is either, about mule trucks being filled by a tanker truck?
I would think you could craft a question around that.
Okay. Can mule trucks be filled by tanker trucks?
Only if it's allowed by the ordinance.
Okay. And if it is, would that become a truck depot? Dispensing fuels?
I don't think so, but I don't know, like I said, I don't know the definition of a truck depot.
Would Mr. Coyce be able to answer that?
No.
No.
No? All right, do the mule trucks follow OSHA rules?
I don't know if they're bound by OSHA rules.
Do they beep when reversing?
I don't know.
All right. How many mule trucks will there be per warehouse?
It's user dependent.
All right, on average, how many times is a trailer moved, keeping in mind that it's beeping every time it's in reverse?
Objection.
These are specific.
Objection. First is assuming facts and evidence that every time it's backing up, it's beeping. There's no evidence that it is. There's white noise alarms that aren't beeping. There's a bunch of different other types of noises used by trucks in today. He's just assuming that in his question.
Okay.
All right, how many times may a trailer be moved?
It's user dependent.
Okay, but it could be, it arrives, it moves to a dock.
Question,
moves to
please.
parking,
No
it's picked up.
speculation.
All right, the smaller warehouse has doubled up trailer parking, but you only have access from one side of that. Wouldn't that mean you would need even more mule trucks because you're going to have to move out a tractor trailer that's in front to get a tractor trailer that's in back, and then move that tractor trailer back into the spot?
Not necessarily.
All right. I guess I can't say that every doubled up spot I
No.
see has access from
No
both sides? Okay. All right, would you agree that when mule trucks back up and connect with trailers, they make a loud sound like a train coupling?
No.
Do they make a sound?
Sure.
Well, how would you describe that sound?
I don't know how I would describe the sound. It doesn't sound like a train coupling.
All right, do the mule trucks idle at all times,
No.
even in hot weather when they need air conditioning or in cold weather when they need the heat?
I don't think so, no.
All right, do the mule trucks move trailers randomly?
That's a user-specific question. It's going to be dependent on operations, specific operations.
All right, but they have to know what truck to move from a parking spot and what dock to bring it to, and what truck to move from, or what trailer to move from a dock back to what parking spot, right?
Yes.
All right, so that's not random. They have to be directed by a dispatcher, right?
Yes, it's orchestrated.
All right. Are the mule trucks ever inside the completely enclosed warehouse?
I don't know if I'd say never, but not often.
Have you ever seen a mule truck inside a completely enclosed warehouse?
No.
All right. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public before we move on? Just come up to the mic. First come, first serve, and if I don't see anyone lining up, we're going to move on.
Gail Martin, 237 Hillsborough Road. I don't know them. I'm with him. Okay.
Do you know any of the other objectors?
Nope, I wouldn't want to.
Excuse me, I have a, is this you, Ms. Martin?
Yes.
It says a member of SWAT?
I'm not a member of SWAT. I never joined SWAT.
Member of
I have
Stop
been-
Warehouse of Trucks since May 11th, 2023.
I joined on the forum. I joined, but there's no mailing list. There's no enrollment list.
I'd just like the record reflect that she's identified as a member of SWAT and a contributor.
Mr. Bernstein, can I take a look at that?
Is it being introduced as evidence?
There are many members that are on that website.
It's an objection, so I may have some questions.
Mr. Tarantino, do you know if she's a member of SWAT?
She is not. We submitted our list of members to the board.
Mr. Tarantino,
On the record, Mr. Tarantino.
She is not. We submitted our list of members of SWAT to the board last year.
Has that list been annotated, Mr. Tarantino, since it was submitted?
There was one annotation like a week later, but that was back in September or whenever the date was, but not since then.
No new members?
No new members.
Thank you.
the only question I have is, do you have a resignation from her?
I never joined.
Mr. Chairman, there are a number of organizations called SWAT, and in various,
It actually says stop warehouse and truck sales.
There are-
Let's not go down that road, Mr. Tarantino,
Yeah,
please.
please. I'm serious. Where did you obtain this?
I'd have to confirm it was either the website or like a GoFundMe page.
Whose website?
I believe it was either on SWAT's website or a link to it, but I'd have to confirm.
We've never
States
had
here
any
she's a
SWAT.
top contributor, so do you, are you taking online financing?
No, we don't have a GoFundMe page. That was shut down a long time ago.
You're taking offline financing.
We do have some fundraising, yes. When it says that she's a top contributor, it means that she's active on the, on Facebook for, making comments about warehouses. Ms. Martin is active.
On the Facebook page.
She's a top contributor to the Facebook page.
Guidance, Mr. Bernstein, because I know if this comes up that you are a member, this is going to jeopardize this application and not to your benefit.
I didn't enroll in any membership. I have nothing. I just contribute to that Facebook page.
Contributed meaning you wrote on the Facebook
Yes.
page. It wasn't fundraising.
Correct.
Anything else you want to put on the record regarding that, Mr. Giannetti?
No, other than I'm placing my objection on the record.
Mr. Tarantino, on behalf of the board, I'm advising you, and unfortunately, you're the party guilt by association relative to being an objector, that if it turns out that Ms. Martin is in fact a member of your organization, any testimony she gives, any questions she asks may be ultimately stricken from the record.
Sure. That makes sense.
And I guess I would ask if he can provide an updated list of SWAT members.
Assuming, which I'm presumptive, that this will not end tonight, I would ask all the objectors, to the extent that they're representing residents of this township, they provide an updated list to all the other objectors, to Mr. Giannetti's office, to my office, and to Mr. Coyce within 10 days of the completion of this meeting.
If I may, on that issue. Sorry. Again, Mike Pissarro from the Watershed Institute. I mean, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of members. There may or may not be members in Hillsborough. I can represent, I've had no discussions with them about this application. They may be a member because of summer camp. They be a member because they do stream watch. I would object to providing a list of members to my organization. We were not formed for this purpose of objecting to this application. We've been around for 70, 75 years. So.
Mr. Giannetti, do you have any issue with Mr. Pizarro, who is a member of the bar and obviously sworn to follow the rules of law, if he is aware of an individual happens to be a watershed member, if they come before this board, you will advise at the time?
If I'm aware, I will represent that, but again, as of today's date, I've had no conversations with people that I know to be members about this application, to discuss this application. Frankly, I'm not sure who are members of the organization or not. That's handled by a completely separate group of people in the organization.
I would make the request for objectors 2, 3, and 4 because they obviously have a direct interest. The other two are more generic. And I don't think you have a problem with that, Mr. Giannetti.
No, but I'm not sure how the Watershed Institute's formed, but if there's an executive board or a board or anything like that, if we have the members of that.
We do have a board of trustees that is publicly available on our website.
It's also on your letterhead, is it not?
Yeah, it is. It is. And again.
At least the last letter I saw, it seemed to.
Yeah. And again, I don't take direction as to what I oppose, don't oppose, and how I oppose from my board. So that is an independent action.
Okay.
With those conditions, Ms. Martin,
Pardon me?
with the conditions that you have indicated you are not a member of SWAT in terms of a participating, fundraising, et cetera, if it turns out you are, then anything and everything related to you will not be considered by this board.
I agree. Okay?
If somebody's got a phone on,
Turn it off.
Last week, you stated that building number 1, the larger warehouse, can have 4 separate tenants. Can building number 2, the smaller warehouse, have multiple tenants? If so, how many potential tenants?
It's only got one office entrance, so it would be very difficult to put more than one tenant in that building.
You also stated that building number 1 will have 188 parking spaces for employees. If one of the 4 tenants offers overtime for their employees, where do the employees for the other tenants park? You could potentially need 376 parking spaces. The same scenario can be applied to warehouse number 2 with 97 parking spaces. Isn't this correct?
I think I said last time that this building is not going to attract a tenant that needs more parking than is available. So, they're going to factor overtime and how many parking places. Typically, the number of parking places allotted to a tenant in a lease is based on the square footage of the building they take. So they get a proportionate number of parking places to their floor area. And so they're going to have to use the parking places that are available to them, not the other tenants.
Okay, so you don't think the overflow will park on Homestead Road?
No, that's illegal, I believe, so.
You also testified that the audible signal alarm that are activated when trucks are backing up can be disconnected. According to OSHA, when a vehicle has an obstructive view, as a tractor-trailer does, the vehicle must have a reverse signal alarm audible above surrounding noise levels. Just so you know, these alarms should not be turned off. We will be hearing these alarms all day and night.
Is there a question,
Objection.
please? It's speculation.
I'm just saying, we'll be hearing those.
You're here for to question the witness. No.
Are you going to advise them to turn off the alarms?
That's not within my power to advise any user of a building what to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Don't hesitate. Keep it going.
I read the transcript. Susan Gull of Fort Hunt Club Road.
I guess you can also confirm if you're a member of
I'm
SWAT.
an independent voice, trust me. And no, I haven't contributed any money.
Shouldn't be a question.
Any other question on that? Okay. The applicants, I'm sorry,
I'm sorry, the name's Susan Guilford?
Gulliford,
Gulliford?
L-L-I-F-O-R-D.
Like just the record reflects, she is also identified on the Facebook page as a member of SWAT, or Stop Warehouse and Trucks in Hillsborough since May 11th, 2023.
No, I joined their page to follow it. I am not a member of SWAT.
There really is a difference. I mean, there are Facebook pages, and anybody can join a Facebook page, and you join it in order to follow it, right? And so then you get notified when people post things to it. And so there's lots of people who do that. That's not the way we accept members into SWAT.
Explain how a membership of SWAT is obtained.
We don't really have, we have a few, a very small number of local people who are members of SWAT.
You didn't answer the question.
Can't hear me?
How do you become a member of SWAT? So if you are a member or not a member, how do you determine the difference?
We had a couple of people who agreed to join, to form the committee, to form the team last year, and those were the members of SWAT. So we don't have an active recruitment or anything like that.
How many members are in your SWAT team on your list?
I think there's 4. There are a lot of people there are a ton of people who are opposed to these warehouses. And so we talked to them, they're interested in, buying our signs, and so we have lots of people who are interested and are unhappy about this application, and other applications.
It's not the question I gave you. The question I asked is, how does one become a member of SWAT? And that's you just decide to make a group of 4 people as SWAT.
That's right.
So just to be clear, when he says he's speaking on behalf of SWAT in the community, it's really just the 4 members he's speaking of?
That's correct.
We're actually 3, is it right? 3 members plus you?
I believe so, yes.
Also, I'm not a moderator or an administrator on that Facebook page. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Valenza. The applicant's LSRP identified 25 areas of concern on the site, the majority of them on the easternmost side, many under the proposed location of the larger warehouse. I'm sorry, can you pull up that site plan? The exhibit. Thank you.
I think David might have to do that.
David.
Well, continue. From an architectural and operations viewpoint, if remediation or continued moderation is needed for any of the AOCs that are under the building, how would that be handled?
That's not an architectural issue.
You wouldn't have to design the building knowing that they will have to have access to underneath the building?
I think he answered the question. That's the LSRP is going to handle the remediation of the property, not the architect.
But they have to go under the architect's building to do it. And September 19th, 2022 EC meeting, they anticipate the warehouse would be built by 2025, and that the next step for remedial investigation would be conducted in 2025, when your building would already be on top of the area that needs remediation.
I don't believe that was the testimony.
Okay. The Environmental Commission recommended light restrictions toward the homes because of the height of the elevation of the building above the nearest development. And they recommended more light restrictions than they might normally have. Has this been handled in the proposed designs? That would be the rear, I guess, of the larger building on the right.
That the site lighting was designed by the civil engineer, and that was part of his testimony.
Okay. Concern regarding tractor trailers on porous pavement, which was discussed. I think last week you mentioned you weren't aware of like spill containment. Will there be some type of Filterra MTD to handle oil and diesel fuel contamination from parked tractor trailers? Will they have oil spill kits and containment? And normally when you're doing warehouses, is there a...
It's been a compound question, and
Oh, well, go ahead and start.
Testifying.
So as far as you know, then, there's no protocol for spills by the building owner or tenant in buildings you've overseen their operations or are familiar with their operations previously?
No, but I know that the civil engineer did testify as to the runoff and how that filtration happens in the basins.
Okay. You mentioned the flat roof. I guess that's on both of the buildings. You said it's not actually a flat roof, but it actually has a 1/4 inch per foot of slope, and you said that would allow the water to run off. That was your testimony on September the 7th last week. But you didn't complete the sentence, would run off to where? How have you designed the slope and the building drainage? Where would it be?
The minimal slope of the roof slopes toward roof drains. So the water goes into a drain on the roof, into a pipe, and then it gets piped underground and to the basins where it is handled as stormwater.
Okay, so it would go underneath and go to the proposed outlets for the 3 stormwater basins into the stream corridor?
Correct.
Okay. The size, the warehouses, I know you said the elephant in the room, Amazon, but you said not an Amazon. That's not what we're talking about. Yet one of them is well over 368,000 square feet. Were you aware the Amazon cargo hub that was proposed for Newark Airport was 250,000 square feet?
Objection. Again, it's assuming facts, not an evidence.
The fact that there was an Amazon warehouse proposed at Newark Airport that was 250,000 square feet is not well known?
Ms. Gullifer, I'm going to sustain that because it's not relevant.
Okay.
Well, it's not so much not relevant, it's evidence not in...
Right.
So if I'd brought the articles, okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
Merrill Bisberg, 4 Hickory Hill Road.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your name?
Merrill Bisberg, B-I-S-B-E-R-G.
Same questions, Ms. Bisberg, that everybody else has asked. Are you a member of any of the objectors?
I think you know the answer to that.
No,
Because my name,
I don't know the
You
answer.
need to state it on the
I
record.
am not a member of any of the objectors.
You were at one time, however, did you not?
For about 3 days.
And you submitted a notice to SWAT indicating you wanted to be relieved?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd ask that Mr. Tarantino not coach the witness.
Okay. Is there any way we could put up a graph, because this question's probably not going to be well understood, that shows both the existing site with the current neighborhoods there and the buildings? Is there anything like that in the set?
I'm sorry.
What we have here, but with the existing situation, including, say, White Meadow Road and the proposed buildings together.
I don't have an exhibit. None of the exhibits so far. There might be a plan sheet that's been submitted that is black and white, but I'd have to search through the whole civic clerk to find it.
Well, I'll ask the question anyway, but I think that's one of the issues. So I just want to ask about building height. If I understand correctly, you're measuring 40 feet in front at the highest point facing Homestead Road for height. And I was wondering where the highest point is along Homestead Road. I don't know if that's referring to the maybe varying elevation along the road or the highest point in the building.
The building height, as we refer to it, is above finished grade at the wall of the building. So I don't know what the grades are along the road, but we measure from the finished grade at the wall of the building.
Okay, so according to section 188-3, the highest point is the highest point of the roof when a building faces along a facing street. When a building faces on more than one street, the height shall be measured from the average of the grades at the center of each street front. So I realize that it directly faces Homestead Road, but the back of the building also has pretty good visibility into White Meadow Road and I think Winding Way. So are you also measuring 40 foot where those face? It's tangential, but the whole point of the building height is you see them from those roads.
I think
How tall they are.
I think the intent of that of what face of a building is fronts on a road is that the property line has to be along that road. So the back of the buildings don't have a property line that faces a road.
Okay, but it doesn't talk about property line, it talks about facing. And there are a lot of irregular properties where there wouldn't be a line. So it's just that we're only looking at the one where there is a line, but there are other facing roads, in my opinion. I'm asking you as the architect.
Okay, no opinion. I know, I already said Mr. Giannetti.
So you don't consider White, this is one of the reasons I wanted to show the neighborhoods. You don't consider White Meadow Road or Winding Way facing for Building 1 or the east side of Building 2?
That wouldn't be my interpretation.
Okay. I actually can't remember. Will there be fencing that will block the back of the building?
No.
Will there be landscaping that
Yes.
would go anywhere close to 40 feet high? How high will that landscaping go?
Objection, I think, is more for the civil engineer who testified as to landscaping.
Again, just let your witness say, I can't answer
Understood, but the
that.
architect didn't testify
I know.
as to the
Yes.
landscaping proposed.
The civil engineer covered that in his testimony.
Okay. All right, and he had the building height of 44 feet when he was doing that design? That's what he was using? Because I believe the height isn't in the plans.
He was using the same geometry of the buildings that we were using. We're coordinated on that, so.
Okay. So the parking requirements in the zone, in the TC zone, just say parking. They don't say employee or auto. They don't say trailer. They say parking. They imply that it's employee or auto. The zone is silent on tractor trailer parking spaces. Did you assume that the trailer parking was allowed as much as needed or wanted or could be designed?
Yes.
Okay. So how did you determine? I do recall that the original plan had about 15% higher, I don't remember the exact percentage, of tractor trailer spaces. How did you determine that original number? And on what operational basis did you cut that number back 15% and still have it be satisfactory?
I'm not sure what you're referring to on the reduction to be able to answer that question.
Okay, I could pull it up, but I'm sure members of the board remember that the original, there were probably 30 or 40 more spaces originally, and Mr. Maskey questioned it. The next meeting, they came back with fewer spaces, and everything seemed fine. So I'm just wondering what the basis was for the number of spaces originally and for the reduction.
That would be something that the civil engineer would have to answer.
Okay, but it has to do with the operation, right? And the architecture. I mean, it's allowing for a certain function, right?
Yes, but without a specific tenant, we just provide those spaces because they know it's an amenity that most tenants want, but I can't give any rationale to the reduction in the number, and I don't know why the reduction happened, so I would just be speculating.
Okay, why is there more trailer parking for Building 2 proportional to the number of docks than for Building 1? Right, does that represent a difference in function between the two buildings?
No.
Okay, will there be occasion to get a trailer? This was kind of asked before. Let me just ask it again a little bit differently. When going into the double stack, will you need one mule or two to get a trailer out of the back? Will you ever be getting a trailer out of the back when one's in front?
Potentially, they would have to do that. Whether they would move a trailer, use the same mule to move the second trailer, or have two mules, I can't answer.
Okay. It seems like it's on the property line. Is there any space to get into the back there of the double stack?
No. No, they're one in front of the other.
Okay. If this application were to be approved with the level of information that's given, would you go ahead and break ground without a tenant or before coming back for approval for anything a future tenant might want, like generator system, additional offices, additional bathrooms, number of initial docks?
That's the developer's decision on when he wants to build the building and the timing of it, but I can tell you that when a tenant comes along, if they want to do anything different from what was approved, then they would have to, of course, come back.
Okay, are you aware of Section 188-31E1 of the Township Land Use Law that says, for an application, there should be included a written description of the proposed uses and operation of the buildings, including the number of employees or members of non-residential buildings, the proposed number of shifts to be worked, maximum employees on each shift, expected truck and trailer traffic, emission of noise, glare, vibration, heat, odor, air and water pollution, safety hazards, and anticipated expansion plans incorporated in the building design. It goes back to that word potential that you use a lot. Floor plans shall be submitted where multiple dwelling units or more than one use are proposed that have different parking standards.
Yes.
Okay, is that going to be submitted as part of this application?
I think we've submitted as much information as we have without a specific tenant being known.
Okay. The TCD zone states that the primary entrance of each building shall accommodate pedestrian access from the streets as well as parking lots. It, quote, encourages pedestrian and bicycle circulation with linkages to surrounding areas. Your design does not show any pedestrian connection between the buildings. How does this fulfill the TCD zone? What if workers have to switch between buildings? What if someone in building 1, in building 2 has a plug-in car, they can't drop it off in building 1, there's no plug-in stations there, and walk over to building 2? What if they have to load balance parking between the buildings?
The interconnection and pedestrian ways was addressed by the civil engineer, and I don't know how to answer the hypothetical questions about car chargers.
Well, some of the other things that I bring up have to do we've talked a lot about car parking as part of architecture. And the fact that the two lots would be isolated is something I would think you would address.
He answered the question.
Okay. Okay. When you started speaking last week, you said you were experienced in architecture for quote-unquote industrial warehouses. How do you distinguish between industrial warehouses and other warehouses? I apologize, I didn't go through the IEEE listing. I know they have warehouse classifications. I would like to know which potential the design that you're fulfilling, and it is something specifically asked in what I just quoted, which potential warehouses this could be and which it couldn't be. I mean, there were a lot of terms thrown around last week. I can give you, some terms that I know, or you could, like pack, pick, ship, high queue, bonded, smart, last mile, cold storage. I would like to know what can't be built from this quote-unquote shell and what can be. And I think warehouse type is is an important operational feature.
So when I say industrial warehouses, warehousing is in what we call our industrial market. So it's one and the same. It's a warehouse is a warehouse. There's nothing different from an industrial warehouse to there's no such thing as a residential warehouse, or other building types. So there really is no distinction when I say industrial. A warehouse is always an industrial use.
Okay.
And then I don't know if I covered a lot of that information about what can and can't be built in my testimony, but What we said is it's not a transfer station, it's not a fulfillment center.
Could it be a bonded warehouse? Because I don't know if bonding confers anything on the architecture, but it might.
Yeah, I don't believe it does.
Okay.
It's just general warehousing.
Could it be a high cube?
Yes.
Okay. Last week you said it couldn't be a last mile.
Correct.
Could it be a cold storage, or would it behoove somebody to do that many modifications to that building to do something like cold storage?
It's unlikely, but it is possible to build a cooler inside the concrete panel walls.
And that would mean refrigeration units on top and all that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's all. I am hoping that Mr. Ford's going to be back because there are, the last rendition was February 17th, and there have been a lot of changes, and they're not reflected in his site plan. So.
Mr. Ford has testified as to this plan. This has been on record as of February. He's testified at length and has been questioned at length.
Thank you.
However, Mr. Giannetti, if the board asked Mr. Ford to return, would the applicant say no?
I'd have to know
Understand.
under what scenario that request is made.
Thank
before I can
you.
answer.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joyce Eldridge Howard, ELDRIDGE-HOWARD. I live at 75 Weber Avenue. I just have two brief
Sorry,
questions.
just one final question. Are you affiliated with any of the objectors?
No, I am not.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I was sitting back there looking at the two renderings of the buildings. One is substantially larger than the other, and I was just wondering, based on the fire code, what is the maximum occupancy of each of these buildings?
Based on the fire code, I don't know.
You have, okay. All right, I have one other question, and it's brief. Do warehouses of this size have a gate that regulates the incoming and outgoing traffic? Will it have a gate?
It doesn't currently have a gate. If a tenant needs a gate, then they will have to come back and request that, a fence and a gate.
Okay. I
But
was
it's not
just
designed
thinking.
with a gate.
I'm sorry?
It's not designed with a gate currently.
Okay, because I was just thinking, if there was a gate, would it be a traffic problem going down the road? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Ina Sivriver, Sivriver. I live on 24 Tally-Ho Trail, Hillsborough. I'm not affiliated with the objectors. And I have a follow-up questions from the last week's meeting.
Can you
So,
just get closer to the mic so they can hear you in the back? Thank you.
So last meeting, there were questions about the building number 1, the big building. And the questions were about the location of the docks. Specifically, people were concerned that the docks overlook residential neighborhood, and they will have, because they're 24/7 operation, there will be noise and light pollution and such. So the question was that the building could possibly be rotated by 180 degrees or 90 degrees, so the docks are as far as possible from the residential neighborhoods. The question was if such option were suggested or talked about, and your answer was no, right?
Correct.
Okay, so my question is, now that such options are in the air, would you consider changing the plan by rotating the building?
That's my client's decision to make.
Okay, fair. Would you recommend to your client to do this, so to take into consideration people who live 94 inches from the property, 94 feet, which is still pretty close from the property line? Would you recommend to your client to rotate the building?
I think there's a lot of factors at play with that, mainly topography of the land, and it's very difficult to make the high point of the ground 4 feet lower and then raising the low part of the ground 4 feet higher. So there's a lot of challenges with that option.
Okay, and so my question is it your job as an architect to consider all possible options for building, including those that might make people's life a bit easier?
No, it's impossible to consider all possible options for every site.
I see. So whose job, is there such a job, and who would take into consideration neighbors? Or because not everything that is allowed by law is the right thing to do or moral thing to do.
I think we advise our client based on all of the factors of the site. That's one of them, and there's several other ones that come into play, and we try to balance those as best we can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
24 Tally Ho Trail.
Hi, Elaine Welsh. I'm on WELSH. I live on Orchard Drive, and I'm not affiliated with anyone. Hi, I have a question about the tugs that are going to be on the property. In your experience, do most of the tugs that are on the property, are they licensed to go on the street, or are they just pretty much staying on the property?
I don't know for sure. I know that they don't pull trailers on the street.
So we don't know at this point the source of the fuel for those, because if they were licensed, would they not be able, if they're not licensed, they would have to be fueled on property?
Yes, they would have to be probably electric.
Is that your experience, that most tugs are electric?
Well, pretty much every vehicle is going toward electric, so at some point in time, that's going to be a possibility.
At some point in time, but for the immediate, my assumption, would it be an assumption that they would be diesel or gas fueled?
Yes, and if they are, they will have to be street legal in order to go to the gas station and fill up.
And in your experience, is that normally what the tugs are, that they are licensed and street legal?
Yes.
Okay, not my experience, sorry. We talked about the inside operation, that there are going to be a lot of high-lows. If there are 4 tenants, how many projected high-lows would there be, do you think?
How many what?
Forklifts, high-lows.
Oh, forklifts? It's dependent on the tenant. I mean, some of them have a lot, some of them only have a couple.
What would you entertain as a lot for a building this size? I know we're speculating, I understand.
A dozen.
And the fuel source for the high-lows?
Mostly electric. Some of them are propane.
What are the regulations regarding propane inside the building and storage?
Limited amounts are allowable.
And would those be tanks like you would have for your gas grill, but on a larger size for the high-low?
Similar, yes.
And the regulations would approve for having storage areas inside the building for that propane storage?
For limited amounts. They have to manage how much is in the building at any time.
And if there were multiple tenants, they would have multiple locations of those storage tanks?
Yeah, even one tenant would probably have multiple locations, but it depends on their operations and how they arrange the inside of the building.
All right, thank you.
New mic, awesome. Niyati Shah, 3 Deer Run. So I have a couple of questions.
Affiliation to
Yes,
objectives.
I'm not a member of SWAT. I bought a sign, but I'm not a member of SWAT.
Any of the other three objectors, or four to
I'm sorry?
members of any of the other four objectors?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. Question about the parking spaces. Did you cover, or did anybody already ask the width of the parking spaces? Are they 9 feet or 10 feet?
I think the civil engineer testified to that. It's one of those two, but I don't know for sure.
Okay. The reason I ask is because if they're 9 feet, obviously you can squeeze more cars into the space, and then the number of cars, would it correlate to the maximum allowed occupancy of the buildings?
I mean, the number that have been reported are the number that are there, no matter what width they are.
Okay. And then a question about the loading docks. Are there going to be lights on the building? So at certain warehouses, they have those lights that go off that are attached to the buildings, and then the trucks back up, and then there's loud sirens that go off as the trucks are backing up. Is that part of the design?
Lights for illumination?
No, like there's flashing lights so that when the truck's backing up, they can see where they're backing up into, and then there's always like beeping, and is that part of this?
It depends on the dock package that the tenant wants. Some of them do have red and green lights so they know if that dock is available and if the trailer is in place.
Yeah.
I've never seen any of them that have sirens or flashing. It's just a red or green light.
Okay. There's no sound associated with it? Okay, because I was going to ask if the decibel level of that sound is in compliance with the township ordinance on noise at certain hours of the night.
Yeah, it would have to be, but they're, like I said, it's just a red and a green light that the driver can visually see.
Okay.
And no audible.
No audible, okay. And then
component.
the lift gate that goes up, is that like one of those chain things that just like rattles as it goes up, or is it going to be like a bunch of lift gates rattling as they go up and down?
Are you talking about the overhead doors at the dock?
Yeah.
It's like a garage door.
Yeah, so it's going to be rattling.
They're inside the building. I mean, they raise up to the inside of the building, so they don't open it until the truck is up against the shelter. So there's no noise outside the building from the dock doors.
Really?
I mean, the truck is up against a seal before they open the door.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a follow-up question based on one of the residents' questions?
Certainly.
Make sure your mic is on.
Mr. Valenza, you testified there would be red or green lights at the loading docks indicating whether it's available or not available. Do those lights stay on all the time?
There may be and there may not be those lights. If they are there, they typically do. During hours of operation, they're on.
I know the township ordinance deals with parking lot lighting and requiring them to be screened. How would you screen a loading dock light since it's horizontal versus downward pointing?
I've never had that question before. They're not bright lights. They're relatively dim. They're just, it's like a stoplight, you know.
Would you and your client be willing to work with the municipality to make sure those lights weren't visible off-site?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Bob Hollingshead, 31 Winding Way. I'm not affiliated with SWAT or anybody else here except my wife.
You have to get closer to the mic, sir. You have to move
Closer to
it
the
up
mic.
there.
Okay, is that better? Okay, you designed these buildings, correct?
Correct.
That involves the floors, the walls, and windows?
Yes.
Correct? Did you design and locate where the bathrooms and plumbing would be installed?
Not yet.
So do you know how many sinks and toilets will be built or not yet?
No, not yet. That'll be dependent on the tenant.
But what if you pour the slab before the tenant? How do you put the plumbing in?
They cut the slab and run new rough-ins because we don't know where they're going to go either.
Do you know if there'll be any showers in this facility?
No.
Do you know the size of the sewer lines that these buildings will be drained to?
Those will be shown on the civil drawings. I don't know the size offhand, but they're shown on civil drawings.
Do you know the typical thickness of the floor?
Probably 7 or 8 inches.
Did you design the electrical system, or does that come later?
There's a electrical service that will be brought to the building, but until a tenant is known, there's no way to.
You wouldn't know how many amps, or you wouldn't know how much power.
I think that's on the civil drawings. I don't know the number right off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Rich Garman, 53 Winding Way, Hillsborough. No.
No, you got to say it.
I don't know anybody. John's my neighbor, if that matters. Okay?
I'm sorry, the name again?
Rich Garman. I'm the house that's probably most impacted by this whole thing. All right? So pretty much what we have, can you bring up the site picture again? Let's just work with the big building. 360,368, 994 or something square foot, right? It's an empty shell. You've designed an empty shell, correct?
Correct.
Spec building?
Yes.
Flex building too, right? You can do anything interior-wise as tenants request, correct?
Yes, within the confines of the building code.
Right, okay. So where you have the dotted lines for possible offices, they don't even have to be offices, correct?
Correct.
You got a tenant that just wanted to rent the whole space, doesn't need an office, he's just going to store stuff, that works. Okay. You mentioned, well, let's go to the trailer parking. You're calling it trailer parking. Is there any law or rule that says it's got to be a tractor trailer parked there? It's a 55-foot parking spot, lengthwise, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it's possible 2 delivery vans of 25 feet could fit in those spots, correct?
My guess.
Okay, so potentially, even though you had stated you didn't think it was really designed to be a last mile distribution, it could be if you got the right tenant. You would have, 75 by 2 is 150 delivery vehicles with 58 loading docks. It could indeed be a last mile place, correct?
I don't believe so, no. It's
Well, you
not
don't believe so, but it could be, right?
He answered your question.
Let him ask the
Sorry.
question. You asked the question.
It's not configured like any last mile facility that I've ever seen.
But it is possible to have 150 delivery vans and 58 trailers unloading at the big building, and same thing at the other building.
Hypothetically, yes, but
Okay.
it's not. That's not the configuration that they do that in.
Well, that's what you've experienced, but somebody else may
That's all I
say-
can speak to is my experience.
I don't want to just go on and put things, but you're putting a hell of an investment here. So if you get the right tenant and that's what he wants, I would propose going to be accepted. Okay, interior-wise, you mentioned you thought there'd only be 4 tenants. Is it possible you could build a corridor on the inside of the building that connected all the entrances and then have individual doors that lead to 10 separate 40,000 square foot, roughly, warehouses, mini warehouses?
I have never seen that done in my experience.
It's possible, though. It's a flex building, no interior. nothing's been laid, no electric, no plumbing, you could build it to what your tenants request, correct?
I guess so.
Okay. You mentioned during construction, the bays in the back some of them might be blanks. You may not even put them all in.
Right.
Is it possible for those blanks to have regular entrance doors?
They'll be 4 feet above the ground, so.
Well, yeah, but in your design, you have steps going up, obviously, for the truck drivers.
Yeah.
But is it possible those blanks could be designed that if somebody, for whatever reason, wasn't going to deliver stuff, just wanted to use it as space without a truck bay, they could have a back entrance door, right?
Probably.
Okay. I got a couple more. You mentioned about noise traveling line of sight, and it was in reference to the ventilators or fans that are going to be on top. Has anybody taken a line of sight at the height of where they're going to sit to see how it lines up with the houses in the surrounding area?
I think that would show on the civil engineer's
Okay.
sections that he cut through
So
there.
it's not you, okay. I think I covered it. The only other, well, it's not going to be you. Okay, thanks.
Thuy An Lay. Sure. THUYANHLE. 4 Ivy Lane. Ivy Lane. And anticipating the question, I do not belong to any, the objectors groups?
Not affiliated with any of the objectors.
In fact, I have the brochure from SWAT, and it was very helpful to let me know how many warehouses there are proposed, so it made me come to want to support and learn about the warehouses. So, Mr. Valenza, I'm also, I apologize, I'm bringing up my laptop because I have the New Jersey Warehouse Guidance, and it's 48 pages, so I have to skim through to ask you these questions. But you have said, I think a few times, that this is not a large fulfillment center. Correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So then I really do want to understand, because the warehouse guidance has it categorizes warehouses by 3 major groups. One is the major distribution center,
Ma'am?
which we know it's not.
Ma'am, before Mr. Giannetti raises his question, can you give the board a reference point that you're apparently
Yeah.
citing from?
Sure.
So that then Mr. Giannetti knows what he's objecting to?
Sure, okay. It's on page 8 of the New Jersey Warehouse Guidance. There's 3 bullets in the middle, and it tells you about the 3.
Again, I'm going to object.
Well, no, I have a question related to that.
You're using a document that you haven't even asked if my witness is aware of it or has read it or knows the definitions of it.
I should have. I was thinking about asking that. But I truly didn't want to insult him, because it is the New Jersey Warehouse Guidance, which I think an architect who specializes in warehouses. But are you aware of this guidance?
I am not. We designed to the New Jersey Building Code, so I don't know what that document is.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Well, then I'll...
To be clear, it's guidance for municipalities. It's not law, it's not a legal document.
This was...
It's not
okay,
what architects are required to
This
design.
was approved September of 2022. It is a guidance for warehouses that are built in New Jersey, and it would...
Objection
Well,
again.
you just asked me.
You'll have time.
No,
during
I have a
pub-
question.
No. You'll have time during public comment to testify all you want about the document and
I was
and
just
anything
answering
else.
your question. Okay, so the
So
question
that
I
document,
had...
Ms. Lee, was submitted basically for guidance for municipalities. As the counselor said, it wasn't a technical document for professionals.
Well, I think professionals who would care about these guidances
All right,
that...
we're going off on tangents.
Anyway, yes, the question is, according to this guidance, a large fulfillment center is one that has a gross floor area from 150,000 to more than 500,000 square feet. This building, Building 1, I think it's Building 1, meets that
Objection.
definition.
She's asking him questions about a document he said he has not read.
Well,
Please,
because
Ms. Light,
No, but then you can-
please
the
frame,
definition
no,
is-
please frame a question.
Okay, the question is, if you say it's not a large fulfillment center, when experts say it is, or at least by size, what is this? What is this building then? Please tell us specifically what it is so we can do our research and figure out what this building is.
So the building is what I would consider a general warehouse. And the size of the building is only one factor in different uses. So even though that says that it could be 150 to 500,000, there's lots of different buildings that could be 150 to 500,000. That's just one factor of that, of whatever their definition is. And again, I don't know what that, I've never read that document, so I don't know. But there's other things that a fulfillment center needs that this building doesn't have, namely lots more parking.
A lot more parking. So you testified last week that the purpose or the use of this warehouse would be very much tied to the number of parking spaces. However, no, let me phrase this as a question. The question is, couldn't there be many modes of transportation into a warehouse facility that we actually know about that don't require parking for employees? Could that be a possibility?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, the second question I had was,
Well, if I may, just, not that I want to ask a follow-up, but when you talk about the fulfillment center and all the parking, why do they need all the parking?
Because they require a lot more people to perform the functions of those buildings, which is typically picking small orders, boxing them up, and sending them kind of direct to consumer, where this is not.
And sorting the goods?
Yes.
okay, well, based on your response just now, one of the definitions for a large fulfillment center. Okay, I can't, right, that's right. I will bring it up later. Could this facility be used for cross-docking functions?
It's a single-loaded building, so it's not a cross-dock building. Neither one.
Could this be used to be sent to last mile? You already testified that it's not last mile?
Yes.
Okay. Well, one of the definitions of a large fulfillment center is that it is the next step before last mile. So couldn't it be that?
Objection, again, she's reading from definitions that he, on a document he has not read, and it may not be the same definition as he uses in the architectural industrial line of work.
If you can reframe the question.
Okay. All right. The question is, could this building be used before last mile?
Yes, there's several steps before last mile.
Okay, thank you. All right. Could this building be used for storage or to be sent directly to consumers?
On a very limited basis.
Thank you. You're actually defining a large fulfillment center according to this guidance.
Okay.
So anyway, the question I had was, in the guidance, and I know you haven't read it, but I
know, but
I really do have to
Objection,
ask.
no, you'll have all the time to testify as to the document.
This is related. As an architect, have you evaluated the floodplains in that area, specifically Royce Brook, as an architect?
Architects don't evaluate floodplains, civil engineers do.
But you're part of a team that evaluates it.
And my part of the job is to design the building.
So you're not a cross-functional team?
No, that's why we have multiple
I see.
experts.
Okay. All right. And then related to your testimony last week, you stated that the driveways are 24 feet wide and are meant for trucks to pass each other for two-way travel. However, you mentioned that stacking, which is like, I guess, where trucks rest, you said that they should occur at the back of Building 1 before trucks make the 90-degree turn to the docks. So my question is, if both sides of the building have a fire lane, and this is just, I really don't know, is it allowable to have trucks stacked where you need fire access, access to get to a fire?
Yes, they don't park there. They're not unattended. If there is minor stacking, the driver is in the truck. So it's not that the truck can't move. The truck is just waiting for another truck to get out of the way. So if the fire truck comes, the trucks are going to get out of the way of the fire department.
So
The fire marshal will have a lot of say on that, too. He might make them paint curbs red and say there is no stacking there. We'll follow his guidance.
Okay. Well, I know it's hard for you, and I appreciate that, because we, as residents, just want to know for safety and flood risk. So thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay, we are going to pause. I see it says 8:37, so we're going to go by the digital clock. We'll reconvene at 8:50. Okay, so we're still in open to public. Is there anyone
Chairman,
else?
I would just like to make a motion at least that we allow public questioning on this witness at least to 9 o'clock, and we can move to our next witness. At the last meeting, there was significant objector questioning, significant public comment questioning. When you counted, there was only 4 witnesses that still had questions, so you decided to stop, and we're already up to 10 other people asking questions. And frankly, a lot of it is either the same questions or irrelevant questions, or questions probably for our next witness, which is traffic.
Okay, so I just want to remind the public, we do still have the traffic engineer expert to come up, because I know traffic is always one of those hot topics. And of course, we have our planner, which I think we'll be seeing her later in the year. Sorry, because I'm not. But, okay, David.
But again, Chairman, I would ask at 9 o'clock we be allowed to move to our traffic expert.
Yes, Chairman, I may have a few questions, so.
Okay. No, you get to go. He's just reserving his time.
My name is David Brook. I am at 7 Winding Way in Hillsborough. I know all of these people, and I'm not a member of any of them. I like what they do. I fully support them.
Okay.
I just had a few questions, Mr. Valenza, if I may. As the architect, how did you design these buildings, and what information did you need to gather to do the designs?
I don't know where to start on that question. Is there something specific, some element of the building
can
that
we
you're
keep
concerned about?
Specific, please, not general.
As it relates to, let me try to see if I can narrow that down if I could. So what considerations did you use to design these 2 buildings with regards to where they are located on the earth? We seem to have lost the drawing, not that earth, but that location?
So the site configuration is done by the civil engineer, and then we design the building that goes on the site. So the configuration of the driveways, the stormwater detention, all that stuff is designed with building footprints that he puts in, and then we design the actual building.
And when you say we,
architect, the architect.
Is there a team of people that work together? So in other words, do you work with the engineer as one of the people?
We coordinate the building design with the site design. So he does the site layout, we do the building design. For instance, there's egress requirements. We have to have doors at certain locations. So we align our doors with where the doors need to come out onto sidewalks and things like that. So there's coordination between the site and the building.
So in other words, the configuration that we see up there, the tan color thing, is that what you're given as far as parameters for how you were going to then design the building? In other words, build it here, here's the four corners, and build it?
Correct.
Okay. When you went through that process, did you discuss the location of these buildings and the nature of the surrounding properties in relationship to what's called the TECD Hillsborough Ordinance? That's Transitional Economic Development District Ordinance, which is numbered 188-107.2.
Only as it applies to the architecture.
And when you say only as it applies to the architecture, does the architecture include the height of the building and the width of the building?
Yes.
Okay, so the size...
Well, not the width of the building. The height of the building is addressed in there.
Okay. But as far as the location of where the buildings are, that was not your choosing?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. When you testified last week, you were talking about the rule of thumb as it relates to determining the number of parking spaces. I think you said, no, I'm sorry, the number of people, one person per 2,500 square feet. Is that correct when you were calculating how many people might be working in the building?
Well, I think that was in relation to the parking that was provided, and there's parking places that are, I think our parking places equate to a little bit less than 2,500 square feet, but that's kind of a rule of thumb that we use, yes.
And just to clarify, because that number relates to how many parking spaces you need or how many people would be working in the building? I'm sorry, I forget that.
One influences the other. So the parking is as a rule of thumb, well, there's parking requirements in the ordinance, so we have to follow those. And as a back check, we say how many parking places, how many square feet of building is that per parking place as a logic check.
Okay. Now, with regards to that, that would presume that the parking spaces are filled by one person or two people coming in a car, correct? How, or did you take into consideration people that are brought in by vans or by bus influencing that ultimate number?
In my experience, that's not a common situation. I guess it could influence the occupant load, but we don't see that very often. A lot of times there's bike racks provided to or required, and we put bike racks in because they're required, and there's never any bikes at them. So it's typically automobiles that employees drive to work.
I'm going to guess, and this may not be your area, but that people who work in warehouses are not highly paid. Is that
I don't know.
Okay.
Objection and irrelevant.
I agree with your objection.
Okay.
As the architect and the designer, I just wanted to talk to you about building number 2, the smaller of the 2 buildings. Did you look at the use of railroad to bring in and take out goods from building number 2 or building number 1?
I did not.
Are you aware that one rail car can
Now,
take...
David, question, not are you aware? Frame a question.
Okay. Do you know that one rail car can take...
Objection.
No, that's
Here
again, please
Ask a
be
question
very
without
specific.
testifying as to a fact in the question.
I've forgotten where I am. Give me a second here.
David, please move along, because I think we've gotten to the point where he did not take in consideration railway as a transportation means for any product coming in and off of that property. So best to move on to another question that's not
Well,
rail-related.
I didn't quite finish that, but let me just see if I can try to close that out. And so, in the layout of building number 2, I'm going to use the word aware. If that's okay, are you aware that building number 2 is directly adjacent to the CSX rail line?
Yes.
Chairman, it's 9 o'clock. I would ask that we close public comment and move on to Mr. Bernstein's questions of this witness, and then move on to our next witness.
Yeah, I'm going to ask, David, please wrap up questioning to items that have not been discussed.
With all due respect, because the applicant is in a hurry, does
No,
not,
hurry.
does not
Now,
mean...
Mr. Gianni, David,
Yes.
get to a very specific question that hasn't been asked. So far, most of what you have already asked, he's already provided testimony to.
I might not agree with that, but I will continue on. Mr. Valenza, have you ever managed a warehouse?
No.
Have you ever managed the trucking operations at a warehouse?
No.
Have you ever conducted any time and motion studies for warehouse operations?
No.
Have you ever conducted any strategic plans for warehousing operations?
No.
Do you have any formal training or licenses in warehouse operations?
No.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay. He's
Again,
used up-
Chairman, I'd ask that we
All right.
close public and move
I
on
think
to the next witness.
We will save, Judy. We will save your question.
You're the last public witness on this.
You'll be the last one. But
Judy Haas, 2 Titus Court.
are you affiliated with any members of any of the objectors in any
I
manner?
actually thought asking members of the public for their affiliations went out of style in the 1950s.
Okay.
I'm here
If you
as a
want to be...
member of the public.
Look,
I'm not a
gonna-
member of SWAT.
What?
I'm not a member of SWAT.
No, any of the objectors. Are you members of any of...
No.
You have to...
No.
You knew the ground rules,
I'm-
so nothing to surprise.
I hope I wasn't too subtle before. I think that's not right. We're all
May not
members
be
of
right,
the
Ms.
public
Haas,
here.
but for purposes of the record, folks, applicant has the right to not have individuals, whether it's this application or any other, this is nothing special. If a group of people are represented by an objector at any application, they waive the right to appear before or testify in an application in which they have allowed another party to represent their interests. This is nothing new. It's been commonplace under the municipal land use law for nearly the last 50 years and generally accepted. So Hillsborough has not created this nuance for tonight or any other application. That's why objectors exist, is to represent the interests in many cases of multiple parties. And in doing so, the multiple parties waive their right to testify unless they have been designated by the objector as a possible witness.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. Can I also ask you whether or not experts should in fact be experts?
Okay.
That ultimately becomes a determination made by the board as to whether or not the testimony granted, given by the expert, is in fact what one would consider to be expert testimony.
Okay, thank you for that. I will stick to architectural questions for the architect, who apparently is not an expert. in
Objection.
operations.
Can we move on?
Ms. Haas,
Hey.
Ms. Haas, I will end your questioning at this, if
I'll
you
be
do.
good. I'll be
Please.
good. I want to clarify.
I don't, no games.
I'm not playing games here. This is very important to my neighborhood. and
Okay.
Very
then-
important to the town of
Then please
Hillsborough.
take it serious and ask him a question. And not
Okay,
say
we're
things.
good, we're good, okay. At the last meeting, you testified that there would be absolutely no air conditioning in the warehouse buildings. There are office spaces and presumably lounges and presumably bathrooms, even though nobody's determined where they are. How could you have offices without air conditioning?
I didn't say the offices wouldn't be air conditioned. I said the warehouse is not air conditioned. The offices will be air conditioned.
That's what he said.
Okay. I thought the answer was no to the question of whether or not the entire building was
He answered the
planned to be
question.
air-conditioned. Okay. We'll see when the transcript comes out. Okay, so architectural things. I've never seen a picture of the two buildings from street level. Are they the same design?
Yes.
Are they the same colors?
Yes.
Are they the same materials and detail?
Yes.
Okay. Building orientation. Climactic should respect climatic conditions by minimizing heat gain and considering the impact.
Objection.
What's the question?
It is an
On that,
architectural-
she's
I'm-
assuming facts, not in evidence. She's testifying instead of
I'm-
asking a question.
Okay, I will ask the question. Does your building or does the orientation of your two buildings respect climatic conditions by minimizing heat gain and considering the impact of shade on adjacent land uses and areas?
It'll be designed to meet the energy code, and so yes.
How could two buildings that are pointed in different directions respect climatic conditions in the same way?
There's buildings all over the place that point different directions, and they're all subject to the energy code, and so we design to the energy code.
I'm talking about considering the impact of shade and minimizing.
Objection and
there's no-
relevancy. It's irrelevant, and
Relevancy
it's just
is that it's
all
part
this
of
is
the-
filibustering.
It
You're
is
just
the
dragging this out.
architectural standard in the TECD zone. It would be nice if somebody who was designing buildings was familiar with that. I'll move on. It says that buildings should be oriented to allow for the use of common driveways in the architectural standards for the tech zone, where a reduction in the number of curb openings will enhance the streetscape and promote traffic safety. How does this design do that?
Well, both cars and trucks come in the same
Could that
entrances.
come up on the screen, please? The design, the two buildings? Who does that?
I have the control, but I'm not sure what you're using it for. You're asking the architect about the buildings?
Okay, well, it would be easier to see what the street concept was within the place if it was up there, but go filibuster. Could you answer the
He designed the building.
All right, let him answer
He already
the
he's
question.
testified to it like 5 times already.
I mean, I'm seeing the second.
Okay, what's the question?
My question is, if the architectural standards for the tech zone require or ask for the use of common driveways where a reduction in the number of curb openings would enhance the streetscape and promote traffic
Objection.
safety.
It's not the way. He doesn't design the layout. He already testified to it, and Mr. Ford testified many moons ago about this subject and these issues. He testified as to the buildings and the operations. I again renew my request that we close the public comment at this point and move to Mr. Bernstein's questions and then the next witness.
Are the
we'll get there.
buildings connected at all? Do they have common driveways?
No.
Okay, is there a problem with the second building in terms of going over a stream corridor and a pipeline?
Objection.
No.
Mr. Ford testified. Objection.
All right.
By having them attached to the
Ms. Haas,
first
you
building.
know what an architect does, so please don't ask engineering questions.
I'm reading architectural standards.
All
from
right,
the town.
you know what? Ask a specific question. We're not going to go bullet by bullet. We have a planner here that you could ask.
But I have planning questions for the planner, as I'm sure you know, because I tried to ask them before.
Right,
But
but-
be that all as it may, this is right under architectural standards. I'm not an expert in architecture.
Right, but please have a point to why you need to go bullet by bullet,
My
the
point
entire
is-
plan. Did you see a deficiency that you want to
Yes.
know specific, not bullet by bullet? Get
No, I'm
get
saying
very
that one of the
specific.
problems with the second building is the way the driveways are designed.
She'll have an opportunity to testify as to that.
you
when
can-
she-
And I'm
she'll give her
saying, I'm
opinion.
asking whether or not there was any consideration to attaching the two buildings so that there could be less
That was the
exiting on
engineer
Homestead
went through
Road.
that testimony, so the engineer already went through that.
Yes, they did, if you weren't here, though.
Okay, well, so it's not a worthy question then, I guess. Okay,
Not
I'll
this
sit down.
witness.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to move to close to public
For this witness.
for this witness.
Motion closed.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Bernstein?
Mr. Valens, is it your testimony that the buildings, and if Mr. Chianetti will humor me, unless you're building in that, and if you're building in that, let us know where in Hillsborough that is. Are both buildings designed in accordance with the TECD architectural standards
Yes,
fully?
I believe so.
You were advised by Mr. Ford or his office as to what the building envelopes were before you designed the building. Is that not, the buildings, is that correct?
Not the building envelope, the footprint.
Footprint, where you could and could not put a building within the property. Was there a discussion at that point or any time in your design of same as to the size of either or both buildings?
Repeat the question, please.
Did the applicant or any of his representatives say to you they wanted a building 368,000 square feet in one building and 160-odd thousand square feet in another?
Yes,
When was that discussed and why?
that was that was instruction that was on the site plan that we first saw, that we designed the buildings to. So,
Was there any basis upon which the site plan indicated that, or is that simply the building envelope size?
that's the building footprint size that was shown.
Was there any discussion or direction given to you by the applicant or their representatives as to the number of loading docks in either building?
Only to maximize them, as we typically do, in order to figure out what the building would yield.
It's 82 loading docks in Building 1, correct?
Yes.
Proposed.
Yes.
Is that the maximized number of loading docks you can go in a building this size?
On a single loaded building, yes.
Irrespective of whether or not there's tenants who do or do not need that amount of loading docks?
Correct.
You have no idea in terms of loading docks as to the nature of the building, is that correct? Who's going to be an occupant, the hours of operation, how many, I realize these are compound questions, Mr. Giannetti. How many tenants will be in that building?
Yes to all of those.
Nor do you have any idea of how many docks actually are necessary to operate a building of this size, is that correct?
Correct.
Same questions for Building 2.
Correct.
So these are truly two spec buildings, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you know whether or not the applicant intends to build these buildings irrespective of the existence of one or more tenants?
No.
In terms of the number of parking spaces, I know you've testified multiple times as to the impact. The parking spaces are based on the square footage of each building?
Yes, and I think as dictated by the ordinance.
Well, the ordinance is based on number of parking spaces per square feet,
Right.
correct? So therefore, the parking spaces are not tied to the possibility of what will go in the building. They're tied to the size of the buildings, is that correct?
Yes,
Both buildings.
correct.
For my own edification, I apologize if you testified before, you designed building number 1 for the circulation how? Is there going to be a one-way in, one-way out, or two-way in, two-way out?
It's designed as ingress and egress at both driveways.
So who's going to control circulation if trucks are coming in from both sides at the same time?
Well, the truck court is wide enough for 2 trucks coming both directions as
How
well.
wide is the loading dock area to allow multiple trucks to be in the same area, loading or unloading at the same time?
It's a 60-foot dock apron and a 70-foot driveway, and then the trailer parking is outside of that 70 feet.
But you also are unaware of how many trucks will be moving on or off the site at any one time because you don't know how many tenants and what the tenants' uses are, correct?
Correct. That's a standard. The truck court is a standard Class A warehouse dimensions.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Well, I guess if I could just ask a follow-up of that. If you knew the tenant, would you be able to say on a given basis how many trucks are going to be going in and out?
Yes.
For sure.
Well, the tenant would be able to give us that information.
May I follow up while Mr. Giannetti ponders another question? Would that also have an impact depending upon the days of the week and the hours of operation?
Probably.
As well as the actual tenant or tenants who will be in the buildings?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I missed, was that to me?
How could you not have missed that, Craig? I'm done with the follow-up, so
Okay.
if you have any more, it's your turn.
I'm done.
Okay. Next witness.
I'd like to call our traffic engineer, Gary Dean.
You realize, Mr. Dean, you made her day right now.
At least I'll make somebody's.
Well, I can make a few people's over the years, Gary. Raise your right hand, please. Testimony about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
State your full name, spell your last name, by whom you're employed, and your credentials.
Gary Dean, D-E-A-N. Professional address is 181 West High Street in Somerville, New Jersey, and I am a principal of Dolan and Dean Consulting Engineers.
And your credentials, Mr. Dean?
Certainly. I'm a 1983 graduate of Lehigh University with a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering and a former member of the faculty of Lehigh University and Lafayette College, teaching transportation engineering. I've been licensed as a professional engineer in New Jersey since 1988 and as a licensed professional planner since 1990. My testimony this evening will be limited to opining on matters of traffic engineering, and my license is current and in good standing. I've had the privilege to appear before this board numerous times over the past 35 years, and in other communities and in Superior Court in New Jersey, I've been qualified as an expert in traffic engineering.
Okay.
I'd ask that Mr. Dean be accepted as an expert in the field of traffic engineering.
Any objections from the board? Okay.
Thank you,
We
Mr.
accept.
Chairman.
Please continue.
So, Mr. Dean, in connection with this application, you and your office prepared a traffic impact analysis dated December 22nd, 2021 that was submitted with the application?
Yes.
And also in response to board professional review letters, you prepared a May 9th, 2023 response letter to the board?
Yes.
You just describe for your board, to the board, in preparation for the traffic impact analysis and your studies, what you reviewed, what you looked at, and how you prepared.
Sure. And as Mr. Giannetti indicated, we submitted a traffic impact analysis for the subject application December of 2021. That report sets forth the findings, first of an inventory of the local roadway system closest to the site that would directly or be most impacted by the traffic arising from any development of the subject site. And for those reasons, we focused on conditions along Homestead Road, and then at its westerly end, if you will, where it intersects US Route 206, and then at its easterly terminus where it intersects at Willow Road. I believe both of those, well, they're off of the exhibit that's displayed. Just for orientation, although all of the professionals have covered this, on the exhibit presented to the board, you will see the rendering of the site plan that includes, as they've been described, Building 1 and Building 2. For orientation, north is to the top of the exhibit, and Homestead Road is located on the bottom portion of the exhibit, generally running parallel with the yellow property line. Our traffic study looked at the conditions of each of the affected roadways relative to their width, their alignment and profile, and the nature of intersection control along Homestead Road. At the easterly end at Willow Road has right-of-way. Homestead Road is controlled with a stop sign. At the westerly end, at the four-way intersection with Route 206, in that Homestead Road continues further west, that is controlled with a traffic signal. As part of our study, we obtained the traffic signal plans and what's known as the timing directive, which is essentially the programming or sequencing of that traffic signal. All of those elements factor into how we go about in the preparation of our traffic study. The next step in the overall study process is to collect ambient traffic counts. We do so in traffic engineering during peak hours. And the reason we focus on peak hours is because that's when the roadway system, if it's constrained, it's during those times that are coincident with typical commuter patterns. People leaving their homes in the morning, going to places of employment, and then the return trip in the afternoon. And for that reason, we focus on the hours between 7 o'clock a.m. to 9 o'clock a.m. and then 4 o'clock p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Within those several hour periods, and we perform our traffic counts, tabulating traffic as it turns left or right or straight every 15 minutes. And the reason we count in such a short interval is that we endeavor to obtain what is known as the peak hour whenever it happens to occur, but within that 2 to 2.5 hour period, we identify the four consecutive 15-minute intervals when traffic is highest. It may vary slightly on a given day, but from our counts, we found that to occur in the morning between 7 o'clock a.m. and 8 o'clock a.m., and then in the afternoon from 4:45 to 5:45. So as I discussed the contents of the traffic study and the findings, they are all related to that peak hour. The rationale is that if we've studied conditions when they're, I'll say, at their worst or most constrained, during other hours of the day when there's less ambient traffic or less traffic generated by a given use, the system will work. Or it will work at least no worse than what we would see during those peak hours. So the fact that this use, as any land use, may generate traffic in the middle of the day or at other hours outside of the peak is not generally of material consequence from a traffic engineering perspective, because we want to look at what improvements or adjustments or mitigation, as the technical term, might be necessary to address the impacts during those peak hours. And the assumption is that the peak hour of the use and the peak hour of the road will be coincident. So from our traffic counts, and just to share a few numbers, but just so any members of the public that may have copies of the study or board members, appended to our report in the technical appendix is a series of, I'll call them 11 different diagrams or figures. Figures 2 and 3, or figure 2, I will start with. And what it shows is a summary of those peak hour traffic counts that I described. And depending on where we were on Homestead, but again, to share a few numbers, on the western end, closer to Route 206, we identified almost 300 vehicles per hour. As we got to the eastern side by Willow Road, as there are other uses along that road, that activity increased to about 450, 350 in the morning peak hour versus the nearly 300 at the other end of the street. During the PM peak hour, volumes were a little higher. They got upwards to 400 vehicles per hour, which is an appreciable amount of traffic, but it is contrasted with the thousands of vehicles that travel, for example, along Route 206. And again, just to share a few numbers, on Willow Road in both directions, and again, depending on the peak hour, there are roughly 300 to 400 vehicles per hour on Willow Road. So Homestead and Willow carry similar volumes of traffic. Once we collect that traffic data, we then look at the intersection controls at either end to assess how that traffic is moving once it has to stop or do something. And by do something, I mean it has to turn or it has to wait for the light. Traffic engineers call that a level of service, and it's a scale that has been developed that basically tries to qualify what we as drivers experience as we're sitting in our cars waiting at an intersection. And there's a little different to make it more confusing, because the levels of service at a traffic signal have a slightly higher tolerance, and the delay range and the best level of service, as it's known, as level of service A. At a traffic signal, that is a delay that one might experience less than 10 seconds or fewer than 10 seconds. At the other end of the scale, at level of service F, that is a delay that is in excess of 80 seconds. And the reason for that is most lights operate where the sequencing changes in about 80 to 90 or sometimes 100 seconds. So if you wait more than one light cycle, basically you're at a longer level of service, again, sustained over the hour. At a stop sign, the ranges are a little different. And the reason is we have a little lower tolerance at a stop sign. At a signal, we know that the light will eventually change. We'll wait our turn. If we don't make it through the light, then we start to experience some frustration and poorer levels of service. At a stop sign, we still have a level of service A of 10 seconds or less, but our tolerance at a stop sign at level of service F is 50 seconds, whereas it's 80 at a signal. And I'm sorry that that's confusing. It is for traffic engineers, but it's just the best tool with which we have to work to describe this qualitative measurement of traffic flow. At the intersection of Willow Road and Homestead Road, all of the movements operate at level of service C or better during the peak hours. And that's largely attributed to the fact of the lower volumes on both roads. So drivers experience not excessive delays, an average delay. And again, this is at rush hour. As we get to Route 206, we then have the configuration of the traffic signal. And as you might imagine, the state of New Jersey tends to favor their highway. And so that the lights will programmed to provide the majority of the time that the light stays green to the highway. And that's done at the expense of the side street. And that's how DOT, I'll say, prioritizes regional mobility and places a lower emphasis on local traffic, if you will. And as a result, the levels of service on Route 206 are great. They're level of service A. Can't have a better level of service. However, because of that desire by DOT to favor the highway, there are longer delays in the morning on Homestead Road. And we noticed that it was most acute to the start of high school. So the traffic that comes from the neighborhoods to the east that are traveling westbound on Homestead Road are creating that surge between, again, the time we found the peak was between 7 and 8. They're creating not an overload, but a concentration of traffic at that time. During the afternoon hours, because schools have already dismissed, we have what I would consider to be favorable levels of service at C and D on Homestead, and again, level of service A on the highway. That tells us a few things. It tells us that there's a lot of extra capacity on the highway, and that usually the remedy to fix that, and again, these are existing conditions, they have nothing to do with the development of the site or any other properties in that area, but it acknowledges that the highway is given priority and that with a reallocation or better optimization is a technical way of that signal operation, that those longer delays on Homestead could easily be remedied. And that's a technique that the township could avail themselves of today simply by requesting the state to alter that timing. We didn't find that there was acute congestion. We know that it's busy, but I wouldn't characterize it again in the morning as being a concern relative to this development, which I'll explain in a moment or two. The next step in our study is then to look at the future and say, given the nature of the use, the proposal for a warehouse, how do we go about projecting what traffic might arise from the buildings as proposed? And the way traffic engineers do that is we rely on data that's been compiled by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which is an international professional organization of transportation planners, traffic engineers, and others in the business like State Department of Transportation officials. But what ITE does, among other functions, is they compile data, actual traffic counts of, I think they're up to 220 or so, discrete land uses, whether it's for housing, whether it's for medical office, whether it's for movie theaters, or whether it's for warehouses. And even in the warehouse category, there are a number of different types of warehouses. And we'll cover that in a moment. But as you've heard from Mr. Valenza, what has been proposed is a traditional warehouse. It is not designed to be a parcel fulfillment center or anything of that ilk, which has very different design characteristics, more loading docks, substantially more employee parking, simply because they are more labor intensive. As we reviewed the different category types and land use descriptions available from ITE, the one that gave us what we believe was a conservative assumption and projection of traffic was for a traditional warehouse that is less mechanized and more employee-based, meaning it generates more traffic. And as we looked at the different subcategories of the different warehouse uses, in my opinion, we have evaluated of those warehouse types that remotely could go into this building, we have evaluated the highest potential traffic generator. And just for those who will be critiquing me at some point later, it is ITE Land Use Code 150, which is a warehouse land use. As I indicated, this data is compiled by other traffic consultants going out and counting, finding a research site that has been built, is functioning, and either by manual means, by video cameras, or by putting automated equipment, usually rubber tubes, on a driveway, that traffic, peak hour, midday, 24-hour basis, can be measured. All of that data is compiled by ITE, and it's published in a research document that's updated roughly every 6 years or so. And that's historical empirical traffic data. So per square foot for a given land use, we can evaluate that data and look at a proposed building such as this. And based on the data points, sometimes there are statistical models that help. We can then look at how that data correlates to identify what would a similar building generate of the size that is proposed. And we took it a step further. We actually considered each building separately, and the reason is smaller buildings often can generate a little bit more traffic than one larger building, simply because there are multiple trips from UPS and vendors and salespeople and inspectors and the ilk that tends to visit. On a site such as this, given that the two buildings are not interconnected, we felt it was appropriate to consider them as discrete and separate development entities rather than simply summing up the 537,299 total square feet. So in our report, and I'm referring to page 7 on table 1, we have summarized the projected traffic for each building and then further summarized it between cars and trucks. Some of those trucks are single units. Some of those trucks will be tractor trailers. And just in aggregate, in the morning peak hour, we have estimated, and again, we were a little heavy. At the time our study was done, there was a small office building proposed on the site that has been removed. We would generate approximately 112 total morning traffic movements, and those would consist of 86 entering movements and 26 exiting movements. Of those, the total truck count would be 10, 4 in and 6 out, and that's for both buildings combined. In the afternoon peak hour, it's similar, only the flows are reversed. Obviously, as an employment-based facility, people leave at night to return home. There may be some arrival trips if there's a second shift, but we would have a similar projection in that afternoon peak hour of 118 total traffic movements, of which 33 would be entering, 85 would be exiting. Of those totals, 16 total truck movements are projected, consisting of 9 entering and 7 exiting. To put that into context, we also measured the trucks traveling along Homestead Road at the same time. Not all of them are tractor trailers, but there are trucks that use Homestead Road. And in the morning peak hour, from our counts, we identified 26 trucks today, currently using Homestead Road. At nighttime, it's less. It's 15 total trucks. Candidly, most of those are single unit trucks, but they are big box. They are considered commercial vehicles for which a separate license is needed. So there isn't no truck activity on Homestead Road, and that was identified in our overall counting of vehicles. We also, as we start to layer, call it a cake, we start with our foundation layer, which is ambient traffic obtained through counts. The next layer of the cake is what the site would generate. And then we get to another layer of the cake, which is, what if the site were never built? What could we expect, and how might traffic change in the area absent this development? And the first thing we consider is that traffic historically has grown. Since COVID, it's not quite the case, but nevertheless, we have assumed that that traffic growth, whether it's from demographics, whether it's from new development, housing, employment-based, what have you, that historically traffic has increased. And we used the published New Jersey Department of Transportation data, which is 1.5% annual growth on the state highways and 1% for local roadways during those peak hours. And we projected those out over a several-year build-out, which we would expect this site would take to be constructed and then absorbed in the marketplace. In addition, we identified several other projects in the area that were under construction at the time that I believe have since been occupied. One is, I believe it's Larkin. I don't know how they were comprised, but it was a mixed-use development just south of Bottle King that had residential apartments and some mixed retail space. We were able to obtain the traffic study for that particular project at the time our study was prepared. And in addition, our office had been involved with a industrial development, and I don't remember the applicant. It was at the intersection of Willow Road and Homestead Road, which was a 125,000 square foot manufacturing facility that has not been constructed. I think those approvals have lapsed, but nevertheless, we included that potential development in as much as the board approved it in our consideration of what might happen in this area in the relatively immediate future. So that's the next layer of our cake. And what we do is we look at those future traffic conditions that we call no build. And that is an evaluation of traffic operations that consider the reasonable forecast of additional traffic in the area absent the subject application. And then we look at those levels of service again. And that tells us what the future might hold before this site comes online. There would be slight changes in that condition in that traffic on Homestead Road at Willow would operate at level of service D in the future without this site. The levels of service F and E that we identified under existing conditions at Route 206 would be unchanged. The final layer is adding now superimposing the site traffic onto this overall network. We find that there would be one change on Willow Road where that a level of service B in the morning would go to a level of service C. There would be no change in the afternoon. On Homestead Road at 206, there would be no change in levels of service in the morning simply because most of the site traffic is coming in during the morning and not leaving. However, in the afternoon, we did identify that the level of service D on Homestead would go to a level of service E with the addition of the site traffic. Now, that's the same as what's on the opposite side of the road, and it's the same as what occurs in the morning. However, the way to mitigate that is, and our report reflects, that if we literally took 2 seconds of time away from Route 206 and gave it to Homestead Road, that would be more than sufficient to mitigate the impacts from this proposal. So it would get us back to that no build level of service, and it would mean that the overall site impacts can fully be accommodated within the roadway system and infrastructure as it exists. Most importantly, and I've focused on external or off-track traffic conditions, as we look at the on-site traffic conditions, each one of the site driveways would operate at levels of service B and A during both peak hours, meaning both driveways have been designed to operate safely and efficiently. There would be no detrimental impact to traffic conditions along Homestead Road. We've lost the site display, but we have 2 driveways for each building that have been proposed. Not that they're needed, but desired principally for fire access and multiple means of circulation, particularly for Building 1. But I know it has been the preference of the fire marshal to have multiple means of ingress and egress for fire safety reasons, and both sites do that. The benefit is it helps spread the site traffic out over 2 locations for each building rather than just concentrated at a single driveway. One of the other elements we considered in our traffic study is the movement of those vehicles on site and the various circulation patterns that I know Mr. Ford spent a fair amount of time evaluating. There was an amended truck circulation plan that was presented. The date escapes me, but I believe it was at some point over the summer. And working with Mr. Ford's office and looking at the size of the vehicles, the largest size vehicle that is legally permitted on the road in New Jersey, Mr. Ford has altered the design of each driveway so that those truck turning paths can occur without conflicting with, for example, crossing over the center line on Homestead Road. What's the date of that? I don't know how it's.
And I guess, Mr. Byrne, I mean, this was submitted and up on Civic Clerk. Do we need to mark it as a separate exhibit? And I believe we are up to
Seven.
A7.
I think that we finally figured out what numbers
We'll do
we actually
A7.
use. For the purpose of the record, Mr. Giannetti, would somebody please identify on the list of your various and sundry email folders what A7 represents?
Sure, well, I'll do, A7, let me pull the sheet up.
Is the document drafted by Van Cleef Engineering? Do we have an indication who the author is and the date? It's obviously not Mr. Dean unless he's changed his.
Sure, and Mr. Dean, does this exhibit look familiar to you?
Yes, it does.
If you can just identify the exhibit. Oh, you can't see it up there.
It's entitled Fire Truck Turning Template Exhibit. And I think there's another one that goes after this, but it bears a revision date or an original drafting date of December 21st, 2021, last revised, looks like it's the 7th revision, August 10th of 2023.
And then, bring in what we'll mark as Exhibit A8.
Also prepared by Van Cleef Engineering Associates. It is entitled WB62M Truck Turning Template Exhibit. Also, as indicated, Van Cleef Engineering, December 21st, 2021, last revised August 10th, 2023.
And did you coordinate with Mr. Ford and consult with Mr. Ford on the preparation of this exhibit?
I did.
And you just explain, how you consulted with him.
Before he does that, Mr. Giannetti, just for purpose of the record, Mr. Dean, do you know what the designation WB62M is?
I do. It is a wheelbase 62 modified in that it is based on what the New Jersey Motor Vehicle Code permits as the largest wheelbase vehicle on the roads in the state, which is 62.5 feet, hence the M. And that is a function of the maximum measurement of 41 feet from the kingpin, which is the pivot point at the front of the trailer, to the center line of the rear axle. And under the New Jersey Motor Vehicle Code, that is limited to a maximum of 41 feet. And so if that 53-foot trailer is affixed to an over-the-road sleeper cab tractor, it yields a wheelbase of 62 feet, which is the maximum, 0.5.
Thank you, Mr. Dean.
And so working with Mr. Ford's office, we reviewed the turning templates for those vehicles. We looked at improving the flare, if you will, or the radii. Mr. Giannetti, could I impose upon you to highlight either driveway? But just for identification, yeah, zoom in, thank you. Just so that the board and the public can see what I'm describing, it shows the turning path and the sweep path of a truck approaching from either direction, whether it approaches from the east, say on Willow Road, or the west from Route 206, how that vehicle tracks and the path its tires and chassis would inscribe as it makes the turn into the driveway. It also shows the right-hand turn for the truck exiting from the westerly driveway of Building 1 as it continues on its westerly path towards Route 206. And in all cases, those vehicles maintain their lane. We've done that to be responsive to the concerns expressed by either board members or members of the public, but it yields a wide driveway. There's no getting around that, but it will accommodate that truck traffic without interfering with other movements. And with that redesign and looking at the overall width of the driveway and the circulation patterns within the site, I've concluded that, particularly with this revision, that it is a safe and design. Certainly the efficiency is borne out by the very favorable levels of service. As has been described by Mr. Valenza, as trucks approach the rear and in the motor court, there is a wide aisle of 70 feet that allows for trucks to maneuver freely, even if two trucks happen to show up at the exact same time. They have clear and unconstrained visibility of one another, and can move east or west toward their respective assigned loading docks as needed. And then we have the trailer parking in the back. I do believe a correction is necessary in that somewhere in the prior testimony there was notion that Building 1 has 89 loading docks. That's not correct. The plan, it specifically says 58. Mr. Giannetti, if you just scrolled slightly to the right. No, your other right. Thank you. Just to highlight it, 58 truck loading dock doors and then 2 drive-in doors. I don't know if the board members or public can see that, but that's clearly depicted on the plan itself. And then those sweep paths, as I've described, are also shown at the northeast and northwest corners of the building to show how that truck maneuvers and then backs into any given loading space and has sufficient room within the 70-foot corridor or court, if you will, that it does not impact any of the trailer parking spaces, the 75 spaces depicted on the northerly edge. So with that,
I guess we'll just going to Exhibit A7, which is the fire truck, and just kind of the same. Did you work with Mr. Ford's office on this template?
Not specifically. And the rationale is, if we can fit a tractor trailer, I can certainly accommodate a fire truck, which is a lot shorter wheelbase. So, the logic dictates that if obviously the site is designed to accommodate the biggest truck, smaller ones will easily make it. But Mr. Ford focused less on the rear of the building and more on the fire truck access to the front or south side of the building. And the exhibit, as is now depicted on the screen, shows that fire truck circulation for movements east and west in the front parking area.
And I'll bring up, I guess I could have used that truck turning template. There were some questions and testimonies during Mr. Valenza's testimony on the stacking and queuing of trucks coming into the site and the potential for that, as well as the number of loading docks. Can you just discuss kind of the number of loading docks and the stacking and kind of how that functions from an internal circulation standpoint?
Sure. Obviously, one might look at this and say, well, the entire northerly facade is comprised of loading docks. Do you need that many loading docks? And the building is designed to attract tenants. What makes a warehouse building attractive to tenants is the fact that there are multiple doors that allow them to operate their business as they see fit. Are all of them needed? Very seldom are they, from our experience and looking at counts and some other information that I'll share with you momentarily. But the objective is to always have an open dock. We don't want trucks queuing in the driveways. So we have truck parking spaces. We have 58 loading docks in the larger building so that no one has to wait. The analogy I draw is, imagine if there was only one toll plaza on the parkway. We'd be backed up for miles. But if there are 58 toll plazas on the parkway, not so bad anymore. So because of that additional capacity, we see it with Wawa and their gas stations, is that you don't want to have customers waiting. You want to provide the highest service level to ensure that you don't have stacking and queuing in areas where it really doesn't need to be. And so that's the rationale for putting in the number of docks that you see. As Mr. Valenza indicated, they won't all get used. Some of them may never get opened, but we want to allow for that flexibility to ensure that we don't have traffic congestion and vehicles waiting to get to a given dock. So that's really the rationale behind it. There's no, to my knowledge, from a traffic engineer's perspective, there's no industry standard I can cite that says for a building of X length or Y square footage, there should be a ratio of loading docks. That's really dictated by the industry. But that is the rationale for providing what has been. It's not that we need it to accommodate the traffic. It's quite the opposite. It's to make sure that when the traffic shows up, it is provided the highest level of service and immediate access. And on the other building, I believe there are a total of 29 docks, so it's half the size. Although I think there's slightly more proportionally trailer spacing. And again, it just allows for that flexibility with a double stacked row so that we don't have, any potential for stacking or queuing. I could draw a lot of analogies, but that's one of the reasons why things are quote unquote over designed. It's so that we don't create a consequence of an inadequate or improper design. With that, if now's the time, I do want to focus on some of the numbers and projections and the fact that we relied on ITE. Because of the, I'll say, focus that has emerged over the past few years regarding warehouses, our firm was tasked with, I'll say, collecting or verifying these ITE numbers. And it was in a particularly I'll say, thorough community where the edict was delivered. We don't care what ITE says. We don't care that that's actual data. We want actual data that we know. And so our office, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, was tasked with looking at 8 different warehouses, just randomly chosen, but all in excess of 200,000 square feet, principally in Middlesex County and in the Carteret, Monroe, 8A area, if you will, that has a preponderance of warehouses. There was one in Perth Amboy, one in Piscataway, one out in the Lehigh Valley, and a couple in East Windsor and Mercer County. The reason we did it is we wanted to have a benchmark to say, all right, what's going on in New Jersey and how does that compare with what we're seeing, in this published document, also of empirical data. And I can say for every single case, with one exception, ITE always yielded more traffic, higher traffic projections than the building actually generated, both for trucks and cars. And the one site we saw that was the outlier, if you will, where it was a site that had more traffic than ITE projected, was at Knox Drive in Piscataway, and it is a 533,500 square foot site comprised of 2 buildings. It is as close as identical to the subject application. 2 buildings, differences, they had a shared common driveway, but same square footage, actually more loading docks than the subject application has. And the difference in overall activity between ITE, in other words, what we've projected, is not material. Instead of, for example, ITE suggested 11 trucks, there were 17 in the morning. At nighttime, ITE would have projected 16 total truck trips. And let me clarify. The actual site only had 5. So, yes, it's a 500,000 square foot building that generated 8 trucks in an hour. Well, in this case, it was 10 came in and 7 left. So 10 trucks over the course of an hour from a traffic engineering perspective doesn't get me excited. It doesn't alter the characteristics of the roadway. It's not of a volume that's going to affect operations at 206. It's not of a volume that's going to create the stacking that has been suggested in either one of our driveways. It is a volume of traffic that works out to be 1 truck every 6 minutes. It's not a lot. And I share that with you just to, I'll say, corroborate and indicate that the ITE data for all other 8 of the 8 sites overstated the actual traffic from these buildings. And again, there was a building of 615,000. And all of this data is the exact same sort of little data points that go into the ITE information that was also appended to our report. And I just want to share with the board, because we did want to give you the basis for our projections. I actually appended in our report the ITE data for the different warehousing summarized by size of the building and the truck percentages. And all of it is comparable to what we're seeing in New Jersey from similar uses. So the caveat being is these are not fulfillment centers. These are not parcel hub, UPS, warehouses next to Newark Airport. These are traditional durable goods. In one instance, the warehouse kept computer parts and they assembled them for servers and data centers. So it was that type of fairly passive use that are the typical tenants in these buildings. And that's why they don't yield truck traffic volumes in the thousands per day or the hundreds per hour. In all of these sites that we've reviewed in New Jersey, we're seeing truck totals, ins and outs, in 1 hour of 6, 11, 7, the 17 I mentioned, 3, 8, and they're all 400, 300,000 square foot buildings. So I think the data speaks for itself. It reflects that the nature of the use is passive, that it is not a truck terminal or a distribution facility has been suggested. It is the use that generates slow but steady, regular activity in terms of the shipping and receiving throughout the day, and but for the employee surcharge as they arrive in the morning and leave at night, these are low traffic generators even during the middle of the day. And with that, Mr. Giannetti,
Just a couple follow-ups. Where
Okay.
you referred they were not fulfillment centers, and Mr. Valenza referred to, almost distinguishing fulfillment centers that have a sorting type operation where you need a lot more vehicle parking because you need a lot more people in the building. Is that what you were referring to?
Correct. And in the warehouse and warehouse subcategories, there is that one distinct use that generates a lot of traffic. Now, those fulfillment centers where they have the employee counts and demands, even as we look at the ITE data, they're all 1.1 million square feet or larger. And they employ hundreds, if not thousands, of employees, and the parking design to accommodate those employee demands is very different than the subject application, and the amount of truck storage is substantially greater than we have for this building. So in my opinion, and looking at the traffic data and looking at the numbers and the counts and even the research sites, these are not sorting fulfillment centers and simply they've been designed not to have the employee parking that they would generate or need. So the very essence of the building design precludes their use from that type of function.
At the last meeting, during Mr. Valenza's testimony, he was being cross-examined by Mr. Tarantino about employee projections and either based on parking or square footage, and at one point indicated that your traffic report relied upon the number of projected employees. Is that the case?
No, we looked at building area.
And is that customary under the ITE standard, and as a traffic engineer, to use the ITE and rely on the square footage to determine projected traffic?
Yes, that is the accepted industry practice, simply because building areas don't change. Once they're built, they're built. You know, we can all sit here with a scale and measure it, and we know what the size of the building is. So as we put a couple of rubber tubes across the driveways and we measure traffic, we look at it on a per square foot basis because it is an easily verified and constant condition. Employee counts can vary over the spectrum. And in a multi-tenanted building, there's the possibility that one tenant might be a little more employee intensive, but the tenant next door might run 100,000 square feet with 5 people because they have a lot of automation, robots, scanners, things of that nature. So it's like a retail use or an office use. They tend to balance out for multi-users. In the event that there were a single tenant who appeared that wanted the entire building, that might shed a little more light. I know this board has heard from other applicants where that information was available, and it corroborated very closely to the IT numbers based on building area. It was not materially different. In fact, those projections, if I recall, were even lower than ITE because they needed fewer employees.
And is that any different, for instance, when you're projecting traffic with an office building? Are you waiting to see who the tenants are of that office building before you project traffic?
No, we look at it again on building area, and the reason is tenants come and go. The same holds true with retail. There's variation, but not enough to disregard the model and the projections or render them invalid in any way.
And then lastly, in your opinion, do the number of loading docks on the site equate to the number of trucks that are going to be at the site, or the volume of trucks at a site on a given day?
No. Again, imagine if we went through the exercise of reducing the loading docks to 5. Then some of the concerns I heard about, well, wouldn't the trucks all stack up in the driveway? Wouldn't that block fire lanes? Well, sure, that potential exists. That's the toll booth analogy. So the rationale for putting the docks in is not because it will generate more truck traffic. It's to accommodate that truck traffic more efficiently and in a better managed environment. But the trip generation is not a function of those loading docks. And for example, the one site we studied in Piscataway that was a little higher than ITE, they had 96 loading docks. We only have, I think it's 89, and 96 loading docks for 533,500 generated 17 total truck trips, 10 in, 7 out, 96 docks. And in the afternoon, that went down to 5. So there's really no correlation between that.
That's all. I have a direct presentation of this witness. Just any questions of the board's professionals?
Clock. You're looking at the clock, I know.
I'm surprised it doesn't have a buzzer or something.
That's at next year's wish list. But probably not a good time for us to start to get into cross-examination, because I know we did start a little bit late, but we're already kind of making up that time at this point. So we're probably better trying to determine when can we continue this to, and get an extension on time of decision.
Can I make one request?
Depends.
Mr. Dean was referring to studies of other properties. Did you say that was appended to the current report or not?
It is not. It is data that we've just compiled in-house. It's not something I've presented, but partly I can see where the questions will be, and that is, well, this site in Perth Amboy, what is that? And that may be relevant. My purpose for introducing it is knowing that warehouse applications have been getting an unusual amount of attention over the past 3 or 4 years. We were specifically requested to go get New Jersey data and see how it stacks up with ITE. I can share that with the board. It's a spreadsheet of numbers, and it'll tell you the location, the site, the size of the building, the ins and outs, and the trucks. If that's helpful in your deliberations.
What I'm asking for. So, yeah, we would appreciate that.
I will do that.
Thank you.
David?
As of this moment, we still have December 14th available.
So
That's the
November
next
2nd?
available.
November 2nd wasn't?
At this time, no.
I guess given that is a long ways away and other applications seem to be taking up the agenda, in addition to December 14th, if we can do something similar to what we did here of if we have December 14th and the next meeting after that.
There's only one meeting in December. December 14th is the only one we have.
How about a special meeting in December?
No.
How about the first meeting in January?
We have to come here on reorg and do that scheduling, like we did this year.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, there has been some discussion between my office, Mr. Coyce, Mr. Mayu, about the possibility of establishing the 2024 Planning Board schedule prior to reorg to somewhat avoid the queuing in light of Mr. Dean's testimony, like the toll booth with everybody here on reorg day.
If you had more docs or meetings, then you would have more efficiency.
The board has had a number of meetings, probably more than any that I can remember. To that extent, we might be able to deal with Mr. Gianetti's request for January before January.
And we'll be able to announce it at the December meeting.
As I said, well, what I would suggest if we get to that point is we will advise you, council, that the agenda is going to be approved and that maybe you want to just stop by to preserve your table, so to speak.
Sure.
Mr. Bernstein, is there I know that there was discussion last week about the drainage ditch and exchange of, is there a date when that ruling will
Funny
come up?
you should mention that.
Okay.
That was actually, I think the chair would like to at least get the extension, and then I'll get to that point.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying I'd like to get that resolved, and then I will get to the next ongoing issue.
Okay.
So,
Sure,
Mr.
we'll extend through December 31st, 2023.
All right.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we need a motion to extend, well, two parts, to continue this hearing without further notice to Thursday, December 14th, 2023 at 7 p.m. or soon thereafter as the matter may be heard, and the acceptance of the extension of a decision to December 31st, 2023, obviously subject to further board action as to additional dates and extensions.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Okay. Roll call, please.
You want me to call it, Tina? Would it be easier? No, I got it. Okay.
Your fingers are break.
Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Mr. Scobo?
Yes.
Ms. Smith? Committeeman Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Mayor Lapani?
Yes.
Chairman Sirachi?
Yes. Okay. The other just business point is the
Well-
business meeting to,
You want to do that after this is?
you want to do, okay.
What started out as one letter is now multiplying like bunny rabbits. We have two letters from Mr. Gianetti, one from Watershed, one from Mr. Lantham. I'm going to make the following suggestion. If anybody wants to throw anything on the fire as to anyone's correspondence, the deadline for doing so is Friday, September 22nd, 2023 at 5 p.m. to my office. Make sure you copy applicant's counsel and additional objectors if it is coming from any of the objectors, and all the objectors, Mr. Giannetti, if you feel the desperate need to run up your client's bill a little more. We will then take it all. We may get something from Mr. Mayu, I don't know yet, and we will render a decision to the board and copy everybody at least 30 days in advance of the next hearing. And hopefully a lot sooner than that, but and more than sufficient time for all of you to then kill a few more trees and come back again with another set of opinions, depending on mine. So,
It's September 22nd,
September 22nd at 5.
5 PM.
And to sort of paraphrase your comments earlier, Council, don't repeat, for those of you who have already provided, try not to repeat too much of what you've already provided. We are capable of reading the same thing more than once. If there is a problem, council objectors, let my office know in advance of next Friday, but I would hope that in 8 days for most of you. Most notably, Mr. Tarantino and the other objectors not represented by council, please let me know. You don't get the benefit.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we got a, is there a motion to cancel the
Do
business?
we need that for other things? David?
David, we don't need a business meeting, right? Okay. So motion to cancel the business meeting of September 28th.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Smith?
All right.
Did I just hear the September 23rd or 28th?
We're not
Became
doing
open?
We're not doing
No.
another business meeting. Boards, business meetings are used for certain things of which the board has, but I think the board's had enough. We need some time.
And also the plan, the subcommittee and planning office has other projects that they have not gotten to this year because have hosted third and fourth meetings, and I'm seeing some nods. So that they can meet their goals and objectives, because I know Administrator Ferrera has those.
Ms. Smith? Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Mr. Scobo?
Yes.
Committeeman Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Mayor Lapani, Mayor Wagner. That's a semi-Freudian slip.
Let me think. Yes.
Chairman Sirachi?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Now you can do your other.
That's right. So now I'll entertain a motion of adjournment.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Good night, everyone. We'll see you on October 5th.